Good day, everyone. I am Adrian Yap from the University of San Carlos, a faculty member at the School of Architecture, Fine Arts and Design. I belong to the History and Theory cluster as well. Today, modernist architecture in the Visayas region will be highlighted. Though with available materials, most of the buildings are from Cebu, as has been well documented by Father Vinand Klassen and 𝗓𝗍 Safad's Lantawan magazine. The list will further add more notable buildings in the Visayas region. This is the outline of the presentation. First is the abstract, second is the introduction, and third would be the methods, which deals with the individual analysis of the surveyed buildings, and this is where the majority of the presentation is about. And I will further explain the results, conclusions, and recommendations of the study. In the Visayas area, modern architecture masterpieces are widely spread. Generally observed in the approach of these structures is of modern vernacular or regionalist view, though in terms of architectural features, the Corbusian aesthetics and approach of Brutalist and interplay of massive volumes are common. Few Bauhaus and Brutalist architecture can be seen as well. The modernist pioneers in Cebu can be represented in three groups. This study discusses the building samples together with their comparisons and analysis. Some are highlighted due to the innovative and exemplary work in the local architecture scene. Modern architecture in the Visayas region, specifically Iloilo and Cebu, emerged from commercial impetus. With the rebuilding of the city centers after World War II, arose the need for efficient construction technology and utilitarian buildings. The idea of rebirth was evident in the flourishing of commercial, educational, and religious buildings throughout the Visayas region. Architects who graduated from the capital's University of Santo Tomas and Mapua Institute of Technology started to practice in Cebu around 1950s. Architects Mercado, Trinidad, Espina, Alfon, Alcoseba became pillars of architectural practice and education in Cebu. Later on, universities in Cebu produced architects who practiced locally. The Society of the Divine Word and the University of San Carlos made way to European modern influences from foreign architect priests or engineers. Opportunities for architects to study in the United States later grafted a strong Corbusian influence within the local architects' circle. This resulted in a confluence of branches of modernism and its derivatives, which led to the contextual or even phenomenological interpretation of modern architecture. The study is conducted in connection with the Masiana project objectives. 82 modern building samples were surveyed and listed. The organization of information is based on Masiana datasheet comparative analysis of buildings with their precedents used as a tool to show patterns of approach and design. The samples are arranged in chronological order. Before World War II, few modernist buildings were built to suit commercial growth in major cities like Iloilo and Cebu. Cebu's San Miguel Brewery plant shows this utilitarian aesthetic, yet it echoes neoclassical symmetry. The building survived the war with the addition later on of overhangs above its fenestrations. The bottom right image is also photographed around 1965. It is important to take note that protruding overhangs was a well-received idea in the Visayas region. Around 1940s, the adaptation of modern architecture, especially Corbusian architectural treatments like brisolier and sunshades, were adopted to suit the tropical climate. This is the CITU old building and the Pen-Sacola plant. The Pen-Sacola plant employs the screen walls on top of the large doors and windows with shorter sunshades. Around the 1950s, cinemas and hospitals became an integral part of a densely populated area in Cebu. The cinema theater, designed by architect Cristobal Espina, has deep long windows and shows strong horizontality, yet broken by the vertical articulation of its corner. The St. Vincent Hospital and San Nicolas Hospital shows or employs sunshading treatments as well. Patria de Cebu was designed for free by Teodoro Trinidad and Jose Mercado, both graduates from the University of Santo Tomas, who practiced and enriched architectural education in Cebu. Around 1955, Patria, which is right in front, of the cathedral was born out of necessity since it was discouraged for the Catholic youth to use the YMCA recreational facility. Then, a local youth initiative gave birth to now Patria de Cebu. Patria is known for its application of tie beams and modernist approach dominated by vertical elements. The Southern Light Department Store and Venus Theater adopted modern architecture to the local climate. As architect Cristobal Espina's practice grew, he was able to design schools like the Cebu Eastern College and Sacred Heart for Boys. Velas Hospital used sunbreakers and protruding entrance canopy at the corner. Around the 1950s, modern architecture was welcomed by religious sector as well. The regular rectilinear volumes, arranged with sensitivity to light and ventilation, are shown in San Isidro Parish Church in Talamban. Pioneering in its version of modernism, the facade's rectangular volume seems to float on stilts. So please take note that the photo on the left around 1965 did not show any entrance canopy. Now the entrance shows a different visual character. A good example of a shaded pure form, the Stanvac building designed by architect Guinness Rivera has sunbreakers in all of its sides, with emphasized large entrance canopy. No major exterior changes can be seen since 1961. In 1960, Ludo and Luim became one of the buildings that showed the foothold of developments in downtown Cebu as the tallest building. The building shows a largely utilitarian appearance. In contrast, the Capital Parish Church vertically expresses with its curving and tapering monumental facade. One of Cebu's pioneer in tourism is the Magellan International Hotel. The heavy presence of solid walls were punctured by small fenestrations and made lighter by freeing the ground, and a colonnaded path towards the entrance is also paired with the screen walls above the canopy for ventilation. In 1964, the Cebu College of Commerce in downtown area, opened later known as the University of Cebu. The CCC facade was studded by vertical sunbreakers above its colonnade. Screen walls were used as well to provide ventilation in the interior. 1963 became a turning point in Cebuano religious building culture. A structural marvel, the Sacred Heart Church, designed by Teodoro Trinidad and Jose Mercado, was built in a concrete vault construction. The thin concrete shell echoes Niemeyer's St. Francis Church in Brazil around 1943, which form recalls an airplane hangar. Niemeyer was inspired by the French poet Paul Claudel, who wrote, "A church is God's hangar on earth." The Sacred Heart Church's body and tower are both in an arch form. The ends of the Sacred Heart Church are enclosed by large stained glass windows supported by an arched structural rib. The belfry is treated with screen walls for light and ventilation. Contrary to Niemeyer, Sacred Heart Church exudes Gothic tradition of structural lightness, emphasis on height, and interior illumination. At least 6 churches use a concrete vault system in Cebu. Founded in 1964, another church that opted for the concrete vault construction is the San Roque Parish in Subang Dako. The pointed vault fans out from the altar tower. The semicircular structure allows illumination from the arch openings in an 180-degree. Architect Cristobal Espina at this point also designs most of the University of San Carlos facilities with USC South Campus. His architectural vocabulary of openness, wide overhangs, use of prefabricated elements for screen walls, use of folded plates become apparent. The building of South Campus was in conjunction with USC Technological Center. The photo shows the South Campus building and the Raman Cultural Center. As one of the most advanced building in Cebu at that time, USC Engineering Building elevated local architecture. The building features a long folded plate entrance canopy, wide corridors with self-draining and ventilation features. From its entrance lobby also faces a thin floating staircase. Wide overhangs shade the building all throughout. Features innovations are first, like ramps applied to school, extensive precasting for walls, and structurally efficient parabolic hunch beam. It was also commemorated by Philpost around 2014. A notable building in Iloilo around 1967 is the HSBC building. The large vertical fins shade the building and adds strong character. The entrance is off-centered, covered by a long entrance canopy. As San Miguel Corporation further expanded, a defining moment in Mandawi City area is the construction of San Miguel Brewery and Glass Plant. The overall design recalls early modernist works like Bauhaus. The brewery plant subscribed to the tenets of modernism as well, such as the use of glass curtain walls and the rearrangement according to programmatic needs. The interplay of volumes as well adds interest to an otherwise massive scale. Similarities like separation of volume according to the program, operable curtain walls, flexible open spaces, and continuous windows are apparent in the brewery. The building was further developed near the entrance of the complex. An interesting solution to otherwise mundane colonnaded structures in the downtown area is the City Savings Bank designed by Santos Alfon, a former chair of USC's Department of Architecture. The slanted continuous windows envelope each of the levels of the structure. Furthermore, it is emphasized by its defiance to gravity using a cantilever. The underside of the cantilevered overhang shows a combination of the Y and straight, tapered cantilever beams. Few additions to the facade do not conform to the original design. Undated buildings around 1960s are the University of the Visayas, Social Security System Building, Government Services Insurance System Building, Development Bank of the Philippines Cebu, Cebu Post Office, FGU Insular Building, PCI Bank Building, Goodrich Building, Film Life Building, Shell Office and Chartered Bank, Fortunata Building, Cebu Coliseum, Cebu Eastern College. Two derivatives from the influence of the Sacred Heart Church are the St. Joseph, the Worker Chapel, and Lourdes Parish Punta Princesa. St. Joseph Chapel is composed of four intersecting concrete vault in Greek cross plan. Protruded ribs adorn the chapel pediment. On the other hand, Lourdes Parish Punta Princesa in Latin cross plan is composed of 8 concrete vaults. Due to a split level in the arms and crossing which allows more light to enter, giving it a height of around 18 meters, it illuminates the interior of the crossing. The tradition of illumination and structural lightness is also expressed in this structure. A fine example of modernist architecture with a regional approach is the Claire Isabel McGill Luce Auditorium designed by architect Augusto Barcelona. The slanted floating volume is a direct influence of the program. There are 2 main volumes that create visual balance and stability in the exterior. The form also recalls ideas of massive yet light. Regionalism in church architecture is evident in the outlined traditional form of Our Lady of Fatima Parish in Basak, Mandawi City, and Holy Cross Parish in Basak, Cebu City. The only futurist building surveyed in the study is the High Alay de Cebu, which expresses a streamlined character. Another compelling structure in Dumaguete is the Silliman University Library. It has a unique character that is created using regular segmented canopies on its sides. On the other hand, the monumental structure seems to float as expressed by SM Delgado Building in Iloilo City. Other than concrete vault structures, one modernist church, which expresses regional traditional form with rational structure, is the Blessed Sacrament Parish at Reclamation Site. The massive sloping volume seems to float with an emphasized side entrance. With more regional aesthetics, the Santo Rosario Church facade shows a traditional outline of a house which has recesses designating the entrance. Later on, around 1999, the vocabulary changed to a more ornate facade. In its interior is unchanged. The structural component recalls vernacular construction, the structural lightness and illumination. Another example of strong yet delicate and massive yet light. Another changes in the facade is with Fairmart Building. The upper floors are cladded with wood in semicircular form, monumentally defined sides, and protruding entrance canopy. Now the distinctive round shape is flattened, and the sides are cladded with red and gold aluminum composite panels. The 1980s gave way to more building projects. Bigger projects like Cebu Plaza Hotel were designed by Sindyong and partners. Horizontal emphasis recalls Corbusian housing projects. Set on a hill, sometimes considered out of place, the Cebu Plaza Hotel has a commanding presence that Cebuanos easily identify. Some even dubbed the building as Posporo. Another contrasting architectural landmark in Colon is a solid volume with no windows that is exhibited by the Gaisano Metro Colon, a two-story structure by then, designed by architect Richito Alcordo, who brought American modern influence to Cebu. Projects outside Cebu, like the Palompon Institute of Technology Gymnasium, draws inspiration from Le Corbusier's La Tourette. One of the biggest projects in Cebu during the 1980s is the Robinson's Mall, which shows an eclectic architectural treatment. The podium shows a massive solid wall, yet paired with a curtain wall in its entrance. With a tower, the architectural treatment of the horizontal bands of windows was paired with regular sunbreakers, but terminated diagonally. In the 1980s, a unique collaboration sprung between architect Artemio Alcoseba and German father architect Wynand Claesen. Claesen produced four books published by USC with the help of architect Alcoseba. The collaboration also resulted in hybrid architectural approaches of numerous buildings for the Society of the Divine Word. The USC Population Studies Center is a structure in symmetrical singular form that is intentionally embedded in its context. The intention is shown in the epilogue illustration of the History of Western Architecture, shows the perspective of building in harmony with nature, a conscious attempt to make modern architecture sensitive to its surrounding. Father Claesen designed a house which he calls the Temple of Family Life. This symmetrical house is composed of volumes with vault-like roof. The volumes are conceptualized in conformity to the Filipino heritage of smallness, in which Claesen took inspiration from Nick Joaquin. The cluster or family of volumes recalls an image of a cloud, loaves of bread, or even echoing the mountain at the back. The tunnel entrance suddenly leads to a cathedral-like living room. There is a conscious attempt to bring experience of polarity of darkness and light. The house is directly oriented to the city view as well. In some way, this building may represent modern architecture in a vernacular with phenomenological undertone. Completed around 1990, another masterpiece of Claesen and Alcoseba is the University Chapel. The final design is a circular form with a truncated cylinder on its center. The split-level roof forms an inverted funnel, drawing the sight of the faithful upwards. Claesen desired qualities such as massive yet light, or strong yet delicate. The light became an essential material in the design of the chapel. The influence can be traced to Heideggerian aesthetics and Claesen's philosophical background. Other works of Artemio Alcoseba, along with Father Claesen, are Gore Residence, Arnoldo's Science Building, Francisco's House, USC Retreat House, School of Arts and Sciences, and USC Dormitory. The only rationalist architecture in the list is USC Main SVD Community Residence. Aside from Father Claesen, Father Philip von Engelen, a Dutch engineer, highly influenced the design of the building. According to Claesen in retrospect, the USC Main building compares well with later structures designed along modern lines, like the SVD community on Junquera Street. This rationalist architecture seems like to be broken down into cubes, which may recall one of the earliest modern buildings, like Casa del Fascio. Other buildings in the list include Cebu Casino Filipino, White Gold Club by architect Alcordo, and GMC Plaza as well. The architecture of architect Alcordo introduced a new architectural vocabulary in Cebu. Other buildings are Cebu International Finance Corporation by Arsenio Abella, China Bank by Sindyong and Partners, It is unfortunate that the owners added an incoherent space above, and another building would be the Virginia Corporate Office. Undated buildings: Manila Bank Building, Philomena Building, Aboitiz Building. Development Bank of the Philippines Bacolod, Negros Occidental Provincial Administration Building, Bureau of Internal Revenue Cebu City. Undated works of architect 𝗲𝗏𝗬𝗃, Metro Bank Borromeo, MDS Building, Samantha Badra High School, Visayas State University, WDC Building. It is important to take note that with his practice, there is a variety of architectural vocabulary. The buildings convey local and global influences. At some point, the architectural firm opted for massive and minimal design. The modernist pioneers in Cebu are Teodoro Trinidad, Jose Mercado, Tito Borromeo, Mario Paca, and Cristobal Espina, followed by Santos Alfon and Artemio Alcoseba, and later on Richito Acordo, Arsenio Abella, Manuel Gonzon, and Arnolfo Wong. In summary, the architects in the Visayas region, according to the samples, around 1950s are still adapting to modern architecture and resulted to buildings with sunbreakers, wide overhangs, large openings, and screen walls. In the 1960s, the architects focused on the proficiency of the use of the architectural expression and the engineering feat that brought about by modern society. In the 1970s, there is a minimalist and monumental forms which recalls vernacular forms, which happened in the capital since 1960s. In the 1980s, the pursuit of individual architectural approach was more apparent due to the building boom leading to the 1990s. For the results, the count of derivatives of the strands of modernism in the Visayas region is that 64% of the buildings have a regionalist approach of modern architecture. Even though with regional mindset, the building form stays largely using flat roof, around 77% within the tenets of early German modernism. The graph shows an upward trend of samples taken from 1950s to 1980s. Due to the limitation of the research, 3/4 of the surveyed buildings are from Cebu City. The graph shows sectors with the highest adaptation of modern architecture, namely commercial, educational, and religious facilities, which shows good examples of modern architecture. Conclusions. First, Visayan architects opted for modern architecture that responded to the local conditions. A large number of buildings adopted Corbusian aesthetics and influences from the works of Oscar Niemeyer as main architectural vocabulary suitable with ferro-concrete construction. Frank Lloyd Wright was a philosophical influence on architects along with their context-responsive views. Number two, sources of modern influences of architects in Cebu would be the formal training in Manila, self-directed learning in local libraries like United States Information Service Library, and peer influences like the Thursday Group, Abella, Wong Alcordo, Gonzon, and Alcoseba, as well as a direct influence from abroad like Klassen, Van Ingelen, and Alcordo. Number three, Colon or downtown area in Cebu City as a foothold of developments before and after World War II has a high concentration of modernist architecture. A modern urban district conservation effort can be done in this area. Number four, changes, renovations, and additions did not improve nor follow the modern architectural vocabulary. Number five, architecture in the Visayas started off as a necessity to rebuild in 1940s and 1950s. In 1970s, there was an individual search for national identity. Later on, individual creative pursuits of style were conventional. Largely localized or regional, it was a constant sway between global and local vocabulary and approaches. Roof form. Number six. A flat roof is mostly used except for concrete shell or gable religious buildings. Church architecture opted for height. No relationship between context-responsive approach to traditional slope form. Cebuano architects opted for a flat roof with briseliers and ventilated building volume as a context response. Materials. Number 7. The use of concrete in the 1950s onwards was a generally accepted structural material. Local Visayan architects opted for a refined pebble wash finish in brutalist derivative modern buildings. Some brutalist buildings are later on painted. Number 8. Corporate buildings with rebranded Misan influence of glass, concrete, and steel construction emerged late around 1980s. The architectural development of tall office buildings developed late as well. Structure. Number 9. Post and lintel construction allowed the continuation and adaptation of local architectural features like louvers and screen walls, among others. Ferro-concrete construction was easily adopted due to similarities to the vernacular filigree construction of the Visayas lowland houses. This allowed walls to be structurally free, resulting in tropical solutions for well-ventilated and shaded building volume. Number 10. Thin shell or concrete vault structures that require engineering feat are applied to most religious structures. Folded plates and prefabrication were common in the 1960s. 5. Recommendations. Number 1. Collection of the architectural drawings, documents, and document copies relating to the architectural works has to be done locally. 2. Further documentation of the plan is recommended. A separate in-depth comparative method of plans can be done to determine if there is a typological evolution or phenomenon. 3. Klassen's semiological approach can be applied to further build upon the understanding of local architecture, especially for its symbolic interpretation. Studies on local building culture in Cebu halted since the publication of Klassen's Architecture in the Philippines. Acknowledgement. Contributors: Carmencita Solis, Arvin Lihay-Lihay. Interviewees: Neil Minhares, Carl Cabilao, Baksia, Dioscoro Alasna. Support: the Department of Architecture Chairperson Ann Nacorda, USC Safa Dean Margaret Rosario.